Ruth was arrogant and proud. Until one careless act of cruelty changed everything. Just when life seemed to finally smile on her, the truth came knocking in the most unexpected way. What happens when pride meets karma? This story is packed with life lessons. Sit back, relax and enjoy. In a dusty little town where everyone knew everyone's story lived a young lady named Ruth. She was known not for her wealth or status, for she had neither, but for the way she carried herself. Ruth spent all her money on buying clothes and shoes to impress the outside world, even though she lived in a cramped leaking room at the back of a wooden house that had seen better days. She often skipped meals just to save a few naira to buy more clothes and shoes to look good. To her that was all that mattered. Ruth moved with great confidence that made people stare. She walked through the market square like she owned it, hips swaying, head held high, lips painted red even when she hadn't eaten. Her eyes scanned people like they were nothing but dust under her feet. She never greeted anyone unless they greeted her first, and even then, she barely responded. If someone made a mistake near her, perhaps they spilled groundnut or accidentally bumped into her, Ruth would insult them without mercy. She acts like the queen of the town, Mama Amaka the tomato seller would often say. Yet she can't even afford to buy any from me. She moved with her head high and her nose in the air. People whispered about how she carried herself, always looking down on others, even those who were better off than her. If someone corrected her or tried to humble her, she would scoff and say, "Do you know who I am? I'm not like the rest of you. One day, you all will beg to greet me." Ruth's arrogance was unmatched. In the market, she mocked sellers for the quality of their goods, even when she couldn't afford them. At church, she avoided those she felt were beneath her. She would sit at the back, cross her legs, and roll her eyes at anyone who tried to greet her. Her beauty didn't help matters. She was indeed a striking young woman, tall, fair-skinned, with bright eyes and full lips. But the beauty she had on the outside was not matched on the inside. People had long given up trying to be friends with her. They kept their distance, warning their children not to be like Ruth, who had nothing but carried herself like royalty. People murmured about Ruth everywhere she went. Some feared her sharp tongue and so avoided her like a plague. Others pitied her. But Ruth did not care. She believed she was meant for more than her surroundings. "They don't understand," she would whisper to herself at night as she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the rusted ceiling. "I'm not like them. I am meant for something greater." Ruth believed with all her heart that she was special. It didn't matter that she came from nothing. What mattered was how she presented herself. And Ruth presented herself like royalty. Every morning, she would wake early, wipe her shoes with a wet cloth, and carefully fix her scarf to hide the roughness of her hair. She would walk to the market or town square, pretending to be someone important. If she saw young girls laughing in a group, she would walk past them with a smirk, tossing a look that made them question themselves. If a man dared to approach her without money or style, she would look him up and down and hiss. One warm Monday morning, the town was buzzing with activity. Okada riders zoomed past, mothers shouted prices in the market, and children in uniforms marched to school. Ruth was walking back from the hairdresser's shop. Her hair was freshly plaited, and she swung her hips with pride. That was when it happened. Ruth stood by the roadside, chewing gum and scrolling through her phone when she noticed a woman standing in front of her. She looked tired. Her wrapper was stained with dirt. Her head tie was loose and her slippers looked as if they had walked many miles. She was clearly out of place in the busy street. Her face was worn out from exhaustion, and there was fear in her eyes. Ruth scanned the woman from head to toe with irritation before the woman finally spoke up. "Please, my daughter," the woman said gently. "Can you help me with directions to the local park where I can get a vehicle going to a neighboring town?" Ruth didn't even lift her eyes from the phone. "What?" she asked rudely. "I said I'm looking for the location of the local park," the woman repeated. "I was attacked earlier. I've been walking for hours. I just need help finding my way." Now Ruth raised her head. "Look at you," Ruth said with a loud laugh. "You don't even know where you are. See how dirty you look. You look like someone who just came out of a dustbin." People nearby turned to look. The old woman stood silently, clearly embarrassed. Ruth looked at her in disgust, almost landing a blow to the face of the already frightened woman. You better find your way and stop looking for who to pity you, Ruth continued, her voice rising. Is it me you want to beg for money? I don't have your time. If you are lost, better go to the police station for help. I'm not a charity worker. The woman said nothing. She simply lowered her eyes, turned slowly, and walked away. In her small room that night, Ruth stared into her broken mirror, admiring herself. Soon, my life will change, she whispered. I can feel it. She didn't know how right she was. What she didn't realize was that her journey toward something greater had just begun, but not in the way she expected. Few weeks later, Ruth awoke to the sound of loud chatter outside her window. The town was buzzing with news. Something big had happened. She wrapped her wrapper around her and peeped outside to see what the commotion was about. Children were running from one end of the street to the other. Traders were abandoning their stalls to gather in small groups. Even the ever-serious Mom and Ketchy, who rarely left her shop, stood at the roadside gossiping. Ruth stepped out, adjusting her blouse and pretending not to be curious. She made her way to the junction, where the crowd had formed. She tapped a young girl nearby. What's going on here? She asked. Haven't you heard? The girl said with excitement. A rich young man came into town yesterday evening. They said he's the son of a big business mogul. He came to set up a factory at the center of the town. A factory? Ruth's eyes widened. Yes, the girl replied. And he's staying at the new hotel. People saw him drive in a black Jeep with tinted windows. Our people are happy because the factory will bring a lot of employment and development to this town. I even heard the man is a very fine, very rich, and very polite too. Ruth's heart skipped. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about. Do you know his name? She asked. I think they said Michael or something like that. The girl replied excitedly. Ruth stood still for a moment. Then slowly, a smile curved her lips. Michael. Rich. Handsome. Polite. Everything she had imagined in her dream man. She returned home quickly and started thinking of ways she could possibly get the attention of her dream man. After days of carefully plotting out a plan, she knew it was time to execute her plans. She stood up from her bed, one money stretching her hands, when her eyes suddenly landed on a red gown, one of her most cherished possessions. She had only worn the gown once to a wedding. She washed her face, applied a light makeup, and carefully packed her hair. She looked in the mirror and whispered, "This is it, Ruth. Your time has come." By afternoon, she was strolling past the hotel, pretending to be looking for something around. She walked slowly, deliberately, as if she was someone important. Her eyes scanned the cars parked outside until she saw it, a black Jeep, just as the girl had described. Just then, a man stepped out from the hotel. He was tall, well-dressed, and had a calm presence. Ruth's heart began to pound. He looked around briefly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his car keys. Ruth, without thinking, walked toward him. As she passed, she intentionally dropped her small purse. "Oh no," she said, bending slowly to pick it up. Michael noticed and walked over. "Are you all right?" he asked. She looked up, pretending to be flustered. Yes, thank you. I didn't see when it slipped." He gave a polite smile. "Be careful with your stuffs." "Thank you," she said, smiling sweetly. She looked up at him, stretching her hands forward. "I'm Ruth." "Oh, nice to meet you, Ruth." "I'm Michael," he responded with a warm smile. From that day, Ruth made sure to pass by the hotel every single day. She would wave politely if she saw him and sometimes find excuses to talk. It wasn't long before Michael began to notice her more. He admired her beauty, her confident walk, and how she always looked composed even though he could tell she wasn't wealthy. One evening, he invited her to sit with him outside the hotel's lounge. "I like talking to you," he said. "You seem sure of yourself." Ruth smiled and looked away shyly. "I just believe in who I am." They began spending more time together. Michael would sometimes take her in his car for short rides around town. She made sure to act gentle, kind, and respectful whenever he was around. She listened carefully, laughed at his jokes, and even helped him source for laborers in the town that were good in building houses. But behind the scenes, Ruth was still the same. In the weeks that followed, Ruth told everyone who cared to listen about Michael. She changed her WhatsApp status to taken, and began walking with even more pride. He's a gentleman, she told Mama Nkechi, who was busy serving food to a customer. He is rich, classy, and not like these local boys. Mrs. Nkechi nodded her head without saying anything. Soon, the whole compound knew about Ruth's new man. She exaggerated the details, claiming he was the only son of a billionaire and that he had plans to build houses in 7 different cities. She even hinted that he had already talked about marriage. But Michael hadn't mentioned anything about marriage, at least not yet. He was still getting to know her, enjoying the time they spent together. What drew him to her was her energy and her boldness. She seemed like someone who had faced hardship but refused to let it break her. When Michael wasn't around, she returned to her arrogant self. She shouted at children playing near her compound, mocked her neighbors, and insulted anyone she considered beneath her. Some people tried to warn her. "Ruth, you better be careful. God is watching," Mama Amaka said one day. But Ruth rolled her eyes. "You're just jealous that a man like Michael likes me." She told everyone who cared to listen that she would soon become the wife of a millionaire. She boasted to her friends, waved her hand with pride at the market women, and carried herself like royalty. One day, as she was walking with Michael into a local shop, he turned to her and said, "Ruth, I want you to meet someone very important to me." She smiled sweetly. "Of course, I'd love to. My mother," he said. "She's coming into town next week. She traveled for a business meeting outside the country, and I want her to meet you. If she likes you, then we can start planning for the future." Ruth almost screamed with joy. But she controlled herself. "That would be wonderful, Michael. I look forward to it." Later that night, in her room, she danced and laughed like someone who had won a lottery. "I told them," she said loudly. "I told them I'm not meant for this low life. Soon, I'll be living in mansions and wearing gold." The town buzzed with gossip. Everyone was talking about Ruth and Michael. Some said it was love, others said it was luck, but most agreed it was a miracle for a poor arrogant girl like Ruth to win the heart of a wealthy man like Michael. Ruth soaked it all in like a sponge. She walked through the market with a new kind of pride, no longer hiding her feelings. Her makeups were now bolder, her skirts tighter, and her chin higher. She laughed louder, waved at strangers, and bragged to her old classmates who once warned her about her arrogance. She wanted the whole town to see her transformation. In her eyes, she had crossed over. "I told you," she said to a group of girls at Mama Chica's salon. "Michael is not like the rest. He sees the queen in me. That's what sets me apart." They nodded silently, some of them secretly annoyed, others jealous. Ruth's words were sharp and filled with boastful pride, and no one could correct her. Meanwhile, Michael continued treating her with care and admiration. He bought her thoughtful gifts. A pair of flat shoes, a new phone, perfumes, and a golden bracelet his grandmother gave him. He spoke about his dreams and how he wanted to change lives through his factory. Ruth listened, smiled, and played her role perfectly. When he talked about charity and building a health center for the locals, Ruth would nod, though she had no real interest in those things. She simply said what he wanted to hear. Ruth's head was in the clouds, and her feet had left the ground. With every passing day, she felt more like royalty. Michael called her regularly and took her out whenever he had the time. But in Ruth's mind, those small gestures had already confirmed what she had long believed. She was about to become the wife of a rich, handsome man. Her fairy tale was unfolding, and she was the queen of the story. The new clothes, the salon visits, the attention, it all made her feel unstoppable. She began to wear makeup even to buy sachet water. She no longer greeted people in her compound unless they greeted first. She walked slowly and deliberately through the streets, making sure her dress swayed perfectly and her perfume lingered behind her like a royal trail. One Saturday, Michael brought her a gift, a small box containing a pair of gold earrings. She took the box and immediately turned to the two girls standing nearby. She waved the gift in front of them and smiled proudly. "Some people's boyfriends can't even buy them pure water," she said. "But me, I get fine things every week. My Michael knows how to treat a woman." The girls said nothing, but their eyes held a quiet judgment. One of them whispered to the other. She has no shame. She's still living in a one-room apartment, but her mouth is louder than the church bell. One of this girls said with a chuckle. Back at her compound, she made sure everyone saw the earrings. She even took photos and uploaded them to her WhatsApp status with the captions, "A spoilt queen," "Love looks good on me," and "Soon-to-be wifey life." Ruth wasn't slowing down. She had started planning her future out loud. "I'll live in Lagos or Abuja. Michael has promised to show me the city life. Maybe I'll open my own beauty spa, or maybe even a fashion store. Who knows? I'll have staff working under me. People will be shocked." Michael was excited one afternoon as he called Ruth over the phone to deliver the good news. "My mum wants to meet you," he said over the phone. Ruth almost dropped the spoon she was using to stir her pot of rice. "Really?" she gasped. "Oh my God, Michael. When?" "This weekend," he replied. "She's been asking. I told her you're special to me." Ruth grinned from ear to ear. Her heart swelled. "Michael, this means everything to me. I promise she will love me." "I believe she will," he said sincerely. "She's a peaceful woman. She always says a good heart is more valuable than gold." Ruth giggled. "Then I already qualify. I have the best heart." But deep down, even she knew that wasn't true. That night, she couldn't sleep. She imagined herself entering Michael's mother's house, kneeling to greet her, receiving warm hugs and compliments. She imagined Mama Grace smiling and saying, "My daughter, you're welcome to the family." She brought out her best outfit, a cream and gold gown with embroidery at the edges. She washed it with extra care, starched it, and hung it carefully. Then, she went to Mama Olamide's beauty shop to fix her hair and polish her nails. "I'm meeting Michael's mother," she said proudly as the women worked on her. "The day I move into that mansion, I will come back and bless this shop. You'll see." As she talked, a few women exchanged glances but said nothing. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Ruth sat in front of her mirror practicing her smile. She had perfected her act. She would be the perfect daughter-in-law, sweet, respectful, elegant. She would win the mother just like she had won the son. But in the corners of her mind, there was still a tiny feeling of unease. Michael had told her his mother was a strong woman. He said she had survived hard times and didn't like people who were proud or fake. She was the type who could read a person's heart in seconds. "Don't mess this up, Ruth," she whispered to herself. "You only get one shot at a life like this." The next morning arrived faster than expected. She wore the beautiful gown she had thoroughly washed and ironed the previous day. She even paid a makeup artist to give her a soft glam that would scream soon-to-be daughter-in-law. Everything had to be perfect. Michael came to pick her up, but this time in a different car, sleek, dark blue and spotless. He was smiling as always. Ruth stepped into the car, her heart beating fast, but her face calm. The drive to Michael's town took just over an hour. Ruth kept the conversation alive with stories of what she planned to do once they were married. She spoke of opening a beauty shop, flying out of the country, and showing all those who once looked down on her that she had made it. Michael laughed at some of her stories but said little. As they drove toward a beautiful estate just in the center of the town, Michael spoke fondly of his mother. "She's a warrior," he said. "She built her empire from nothing. She values humility and kindness more than riches." Ruth nodded silently. She smiled even though her stomach churned with anxiety. They pulled into the compound, a large house surrounded by flowers and paved roads. Ruth took in the beauty and smiled. This would be her future home, she thought. Michael walked around to open her door, then led her up the steps toward the door. Just before knocking, he turned to her and said, "Ruth, no matter what happens in there, just be real." "Okay." She smiled. "Of course. I've got this." The door opened before he could knock twice. Standing in the doorway was Michael's mother. Both women froze. Michael's mother was the same woman she had mocked that day on the roadside. The same dirty, weak, dusty woman who had begged her for directions. The one she had laughed at, who she almost gave a punch in anger unprovoked. Now that same woman was standing tall in fine clothes, her hair beautifully styled, with an air of dignity that made Ruth's chest tighten. Ruth's smile faded slowly. Her throat tightened. Her knees weakened. Mama Grace stared without blinking. Then a deep, heavy silence filled the air between them. Michael, unaware of the history, stepped forward with a smile. "Mama," he said cheerfully, "this is Ruth, the young woman I told you about." Mama Grace didn't speak for several seconds. She stepped aside slowly and said in a quiet voice, "Come in." Ruth entered the house on shaky legs. Her palms were sweating. She tried to smile again, but Mama Grace had not looked away from her once. She sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa while Michael fetched drinks from the kitchen. The moment he left the room, Mama Grace leaned closer. "I know you," she said calmly. "You're the girl from that day." Ruth swallowed hard. "Ma, I didn't know it was you." "You didn't care who I was," Mama Grace said. "That day, I was covered in dirt. My feet were bruised. My driver had just been killed in front of me. I asked you for help, and you made me feel like I was less than a human being." Ruth's eyes welled up with tears. "I was foolish. I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "You laughed," Mama Grace continued, her voice steady. "You said I looked like someone who slept in the bush. You mocked me, and I walked away, not just hurt, but broken." Just then, Michael returned with a tray. He noticed the tension and frowned. "Is everything okay?" His mother looked at him with sad eyes. "Michael, this is the girl I told you about. The one who humiliated me after the robbery. This is her." Michael dropped the tray. The glass of juice fell and shattered on the tiled floor. He stared at Ruth in disbelief. "No," he said slowly. "No, it can't be." Ruth fell to her knees. "Michael, I didn't know. I was stupid. I've changed. Please." But Michael backed away, his heart torn between confusion and anger. "I swore," he said to himself. "I swore that I would never marry anyone with a cruel heart." "Mama, please." Ruth turned to Mama Grace in tears. "Forgive me." But the silence in the room was louder than her begging. The truth had been revealed, and the dream she had built with pride was already crumbling beneath her feet. Michael stood frozen, staring at Ruth as if seeing her for the first time. His hands trembled slightly, and his heart pounded inside his chest. He tried to connect the woman he had fallen for with the woman his mother had described in her pain, and it was nearly impossible. But the truth stood before him, and it hurt more than anything he had ever felt. Ruth remained on her knees, her face stained with tears, her makeup ruined, her voice barely a whisper. "Michael, please. I didn't know it was her. I didn't know she was your mother. I was just." "You were just what?" Michael asked quietly, his voice low but sharp. "You were just being cruel, just being arrogant, just being yourself. I was angry that day. I was tired. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to what?" Mama Grace cut in, her voice calm but filled with deep emotion. "Did you need to know my name before deciding whether I deserved compassion?" Ruth looked down in shame. "You didn't just ignore me," Mama Grace continued. "You mocked me, you insulted me, you almost gave me a punch. I was running for my life, barefoot, bleeding, and you looked at me like I was trash." Michael turned away, rubbing his face with his hands. Everything inside him was spinning. Ruth tried again. "I've changed, Michael. Being with you, it made me want to be better." "But who are you when nobody is watching?" he asked coldly. "That day, you weren't trying to impress anyone. You were just being yourself. And that self, the one that looked at a helpless woman and decided to laugh at her pain, is not someone I can bring into my life." His words pierced her heart like a knife. "I made a mistake," Ruth cried. "Please don't throw me away like this. I love you." Michael's face was filled with pain. "You say you love me, but love must come from a good heart. A kind heart. You can't love me and hate every other person's." Ruth crawled forward on her knees, grabbing his hands. "Please, give me a chance to make things right." Mama Grace stood up, her eyes fixed on the broken girl at her feet. She didn't shout. She didn't insult. She simply said, "Your pride brought you here, Ruth. And now, it has taken everything away. What you refused to give that day, compassion, mercy, and dignity, was all you needed today. But it's too late." Michael gently pulled his hands away. "I prayed," he said quietly, "that whoever hurt my mother would feel what she felt. That they would understand what it's like to be rejected when they needed love the most." He looked into Ruth's tear-filled eyes. "I didn't know I was praying against the woman I thought I loved." Ruth began to sob uncontrollably, her cries echoing through the quiet house. Michael walked away and stood by the door, his back to her. "I wish things were different. But I won't build my future with someone who had the chance to do right and chose cruelty instead." The silence that followed was long and heavy. After a moment, Mama Grace said softly, "Take her home, Michael." Without another word, Michael opened the door. Ruth got up slowly, wiping her face with trembling hands. She turned once more to Mama Grace, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. Truly. From the bottom of my heart." Mama Grace nodded slowly. "I know. But sometimes, sorry doesn't rebuild what pride has destroyed." And with that, Ruth stepped outside. The sun was still shining, but everything felt dark. The walk back to the car was the longest of her life. The journey home felt like a funeral procession. Her future, the one she had flaunted before the world, was gone. All that remained was the bitter taste of regret and the echo of her own arrogance. In her heart, something shattered. She didn't just lose Michael. She lost herself. And now the world would remember her, not for her beauty, not for her confidence, but as the girl who mocked mercy and paid the price. The journey back to her town felt longer than ever. Michael didn't speak a single word. His eyes remained on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Ruth sat in the passenger seat, broken and silent. Her gown no longer looked glamorous. Her makeup was smudged. Her heart was crushed under the weight of shame. She glanced at him occasionally, hoping he might change his mind or just say something, anything. But the Michael beside her was no longer the man who smiled at her stories or touched her hand gently. That man had disappeared the moment the truth opened the door. When they reached her compound, Michael didn't even park properly. He stopped briefly, looked ahead, and said in a flat voice, "This is your stop." Ruth didn't move at first. Her heart begged her to say something, to try one last time. But she knew deep down, she knew it was over. She opened the door slowly and stepped out. "Michael," she whispered. He turned slightly, his eyes empty. "Take care of yourself, Ruth." Then he drove off. Ruth stood there, alone on the dusty ground, staring after the car until it vanished. The neighbors peeped from their windows, whispering as they watched her stand motionless in her fine dress, looking nothing like the triumphant queen they were expecting. Sandra came out from her room, arms folded. "You're back?" she asked softly. Ruth nodded, tears already spilling again. "He ended it?" Sandra asked, though she already knew the answer. Ruth fell to her knees right there in the compound and sobbed uncontrollably. Her wails echoed between the buildings. It was no longer just the pain of heartbreak, it was the pain of disgrace. The kind that crawled deep into the soul and made her wish she could undo everything. Her phone buzzed in her handbag. Messages. Missed calls. WhatsApp notifications. Her carefully crafted fairy tale was falling apart. One of the messages read, "So he dumped you? I heard everything. Pride goes before a fall." Another read, "Auntie Dubai, how market?" After reading few of the numerous messages on her phone, she turned off the phone. Everything she had used to boast online was now the very thing haunting her. Her makeup, her flashy dress, the photos, the gossip, all of it mocked her now. She dragged herself into her room and locked the door. Inside the small, poorly lit space, she removed her gown and collapsed on the bed. Her sobs returned. This time, softer, filled with regret, not just grief. She remembered the day of the incident, how the woman had begged her, how she had turned up her nose, how she had mocked the woman's dirty appearance and turned away. She remembered the way people had stared at her that day. She thought she was being powerful, But now she realized, she had been cruel. And now, that same woman turned out to be the gatekeeper to everything Ruth once dreamed of. She whispered into the silence, "God, what have I done?" The walls didn't respond. The following morning, Ruth didn't come out. Neighbors murmured as they passed her door. Children played outside, mimicking her in teasing tones. "My boyfriend is rich. He's taking me to Dubai." They laughed. Ruth heard them through the window. It crushed her soul. The days that followed were quiet, almost too quiet. Ruth stopped stepping outside altogether. The girl who once stormed the streets with loud laughter and bold confidence had vanished. In her place was a shadow, silent, broken, and invisible. In the days that followed inside her small room, she barely ate. Her clothes stayed scattered. The gown she had worn to Michael's house still lay crumpled on the floor like a painful reminder of her ruined dreams. The earrings he once gifted her were now tossed in a corner. Nothing sparkled anymore. Not her clothes. Not her voice. Not even her thoughts. She sat by the window each day, staring blankly at the dusty road where she used to strut with pride. But now, her reflection in the glass seemed to mock her. She had dreamed of becoming a wife, a queen, a boss lady. But in the end, she became the town's greatest lesson in humility. She had learnt the hard way. My dear viewers, what lessons did you learn from this story? We would love to hear your thought in the comments section. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video to your friends and loved ones. Also ensure to subscribe if you have not done so by now. Turn on the notification bell so as to get a notification whenever we post a new story. Thanks for watching. Until we come your way again, for now from us it's bye.